Welcome to Perspectives Podcast. My name is Bruce. This is a place for conversation from a variety of cultural and faith perspectives. Today, we have a wonderful friend and guest and neighbor from Ukraine with us, the first of several Ukraine updates that we're going to do. Before I introduce Lena, I know many of you in the West, the news isn't showing as much what's happening in Ukraine. And over here in Romania, I was going to say Ukraine, we are watching and listening. And actually, I listened to The Telegram is a great podcast. It's out of the UK. They have a daily podcast in English, reporters inside Ukraine. And they give I think a non-political, as much as possible, perspective on what's happening, at least from the military perspective, as well as civilian situation inside Ukraine. And so I get a lot of my information from there. But because of friends and ministry connections inside of Ukraine, we really get as much, if not more, information from them, as much as the West can give their bird's eye opinion and perspective. There's nothing like living inside Ukraine or any country during an active war. And Lena has been inside Ukraine. She grew up there, but she's been there since the onset of the war and living in Rzeszów, which is where our family has spent the last 15 years. And she's here with us in Romania. This past week, this is the first time she's left Ukraine. Her and her friend Anya, my friend Dochka, here in Romania with us, bringing a piece of home. And we thought it would be, before they leave tomorrow, it would be really important to get the perspective of Lena, who's lived through something she never anticipated in a million years, that her country would be invaded, and the whole context of life has changed. You know, your relationships, your neighbors, your rhythms, everything you can think of. Lena's married to Dima, and Dima and Lena work at Lighthouse, and they also just have family roots in the area. This is an opportunity because Lena and I haven't talked so much. She's come here and she's leaving tomorrow. She's went for a few days just with rest in the mountains with my wife and has been visiting friends, but they are anxious to get back. I want to introduce Lena. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
And she's a little bit nervous, as am I. This is only the second or third podcast that we've done. But these conversations that we have are so meaningful and helpful to me and to Deborah that we're actually in our living room right now. And so just want you to relax and let's just talk about the last few months and how you're doing. Maybe just share a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and give us a picture of who Lena is.
Okay, I was born in a small town, not far from Rzeszów and not far from Kiev. Grew up there. I went to university in Kiev and lived in Kiev for 7 years. And then came back to my city to serve in church. I was one of the leaders of youth group there, and I was leading worship in church. And there I met my husband, Dima. We got married. And in few years after we got married, we met Bruce. Once he invited us to serve in Rzeszów in Lighthouse. So in Lighthouse, we continued to work with youth. I opened for myself new sphere. We work with widows and old ladies and men. It was awesome. It was something new for me, and I liked it very much. And my husband is a musician, so he runs Bruce's studio.
It's not my studio. It's his studio. I'm not allowed to touch anything.
Okay.
Dima knows where every chord is, so let's get it straight. He works in his studio.
Okay.
Yes, and both Dima and Lena have been, over the past few years, just really good friends and neighbors as well. Can you take us back to just maybe a little of your story, like how, as a believer in Ukraine, how did you come to know Christ?
I was too young. I was like 13 or 14 years old. So my friend, which I met on the school disco,
Nice.
and it was Aless,
Really?
also our friend. Yeah, he invited me to come to youth group, and the church just had been started in Kaharwik. It was very small, like home group, and we had youth group, and I liked it very much. I liked the foreigners, like who came to tell us about Jesus. They were different. They were happy.
Could they dance?
No.
No.
They didn't dance, but we played lots of games. We sang song, just had fun, so I liked it. And I liked them so much, so it was like very natural to me, like in a couple weeks when they asked, do you want to be part of the church, like believe Jesus? I said, yes, of course, I like it. So, but because I was too young, I think I just liked the atmosphere. And I accepted atmosphere. But after that, God slowly started to change my life.
He saw your open heart and started to work more and more. That's cool. We'll fast forward here. And you and Dima, now Dima also has a heart for and an amazing testimony as well. And so you both, I would say, have a heart for people and being authentic, having like genuine relationships with people. And so it was easy to see that God was at work in your lives and going to use you in different ways. Neither of us, any of us, imagined it would be like today, where you and Dima are actually the main leaders over Lighthouse as our family has left, and now you're taking up that responsibility. Take us back to last Christmas, New Year's. The army is amassing, the Russian army, and we're seeing the news. I start to send some, not warnings, but I'm in the West and I'm here. I'm watching the news every day, and Deb and I are all obviously concerned and praying. Did you believe as the closer January, February that something would happen, or was it a total shock to you, Dima?
Yes, it was a total shock. We didn't believe that something can happen. Maybe because we heard these messages through years, like once in like few years we had warnings, and I think Russians manipulated with this theme a lot. Every time Ukrainian government just decided something they didn't like, they were manipulated this like theme.
Right.
Building
of
their
possible war, and they were doing trainings. This wasn't the first time they brought thousands of troops around the border. So people need to realize this was happening off and on. Not only the war in the East for 8 years, but that they would do these training exercise, and also in Belarus. Even when we were in Belarus, our family, the Russian army would come in and do all these exercises. But to the Ukrainians, you got used to that, I think.
Yeah, so we got used to that very much. We didn't believe at all.
It's February. Everybody's just trying to stay warm. You go to sleep one night and wake up the next morning and war has begun. Take us back to that first 24 hours and what were you feeling? How did you and your family react?
We were very shocked. So someone, I don't remember who it was, called us like even before 6 a.m. and said it started. So like many people, even in Kaharwik and Kyiv, lots of my friends heard actually some explosions or some noises, and they woke up in the morning, and this news spread very fast around Ukraine.
All the social networks lit up.
Yeah.
It was just overwhelming.
Yeah, so we were shocked. We didn't know what to do. But because Bruce and Natasha told us before to be ready and asked us continuously, what you gonna do if the war starts? So we had some plans. We had our bag packed, but I don't know why. I prayed to the Lord and I asked him what to do, and I think I heard his voice like inside of me, like he said, everything gonna be all right. Just stay. Mm. Yeah, and then later, in couple days, like they said that men cannot go out of Ukraine. Mm-hmm. So and at that moment I understood that I'm staying for sure because I'm not leaving Dima. Like I cannot imagine myself to live somewhere else, but he stays in Ukraine. I think I would much more nervous than living in Ukraine next to him.
So you made the decision to stay, and this is before Russia comes down from Belarus, starts to circle around Kiev, and I remember looking. It was like a cancer that just began to circle. And our village is about 70, 80 kilometers directly south on the Dnieper River. And so if that circle had completed and they had surrounded Kiev, Rzhishev was right in line. Like they could come right down in a day or two and be there. And I remember as that started to happen, thinking, get out. Like I was encouraging everyone to leave. At the same time, we're having all these refugees come in from the east, from Sumy, Kharkiv, like everybody's coming from the eastern borders, and even from Kiev were coming down because of what was happening. And so our home, our area, including our houses, became places of ministry very quickly. Take our listeners back to, there was a period where it seemed to be very overwhelming. Did you ever question whether you really heard from God? Like, should I stay during that process, or did you always have peace?
No, from the first day, I didn't understand myself because I was very concentrated. I had no fear. I didn't cry. I was super concentrated, and it was a surprise for me because I think I never in my life been so much concentrated. Like
we would say focused.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't have fear, and I think now when I think about those days, I understand that I was like too naive. After Russians left the Kiev, I understood what that means and what would I go through if really they came to Rzhishev.
So, speaking of, for our listeners, the devastation from the occupation, Borodyanka, Bucha, these areas. So, and that's important, I think, for people to realize is how shocking, like reality wake up for the whole country. This is what happens when territory is taken. It's not everything's fine. We're here. You've been liberated. This idea that they're liberating Nazis. No, they came in and there was carnage and suffering and the worst kinds of things that you can imagine. And that would be fair to say it was a shock to Ukrainians, right?
Yes. Yeah. I believe that when God told me to stay and He will be with me and everything will be fine. And if I need to leave, He will tell me. It was my deal with God that He will tell me if. So, and it helped me to go through because I really believed that I will hear from the Lord if we need to leave Rzhishev. So, and I think that's what He meant because the Russians didn't come and everything is fine. But then after we saw what Russians do in occupied cities, we were shocked. And I would say I would never want to go through it. Mm-hmm. So my opinion now, if they come in, Yeah, so if we see
You have an exit plan.
too close, we should move to
Right.
west.
Can you just tell our listeners some of the stories, or maybe pick one or two folks that came from places where their apartments or their places were destroyed and they had nowhere else to go? Just does anybody come to mind that you could tell us that we were able to provide space for and serve?
Alexander and his wife Luba. They are a couple in years who came from Kharkiv, and they went through like this bombing not far from like they not really from Kharkiv but outside of the city. Like, Alexander was injured. Like we had families with kids who saw planes falling on their way to Rizhiev, like lots of tanks, and all these people who went through some like bombing. They look different at everything. And we feel that they really need safe place, and that's what we try to provide in Rizhiev. So some of them came for some time and left abroad from us, like to West and then abroad. Some of them came back to their cities, like towns, because they couldn't take it anymore, being away from home. So, and after Russians went away from Kyiv, but some people stayed because they had no houses anymore and cars. Like this man from Irpin, bomb,
A rocket.
the rocket came to his apartment in Irpin, and his guys burned. So like he had no place to go back, so he stayed. But now most of our guests, they found the place to live, like because we encouraged them to go on, to settle their life, find a job, like find new friends in Rizhiev or somewhere else, and live further.
You're talking about like starting your new life in Ukraine. We're in Romania, and many Ukrainians all over the world now doing this, putting down roots, trying to start again, or waiting still, for stability inside Ukraine. But as someone who's in Ukraine now, what is the condition right now? The economy, is there work?
Like after the war started, everything stopped. Everything was closed. Just only like a few product shops were working, and it seems like everything is frozen. But then in some time, like I remember in month and a half, our government and president said, hey, let's work. Let's do business. Let's do economics in Ukraine, especially those who like far from the war zone. People started to open their cafes and restaurants and do life and do business. But it was hard because logistic is broken. Some of sklady,
Warehouses.
like storage places for different products next to Kyiv were destroyed. So lots of people.
The supply chain was broken, and still is in some ways.
Yeah. So for some people it was like very hard. Some people had to start it from the beginning, and some. I don't know if there's enough of my English to explain this fear, but in Ukraine, we're not like we say we have corruption, but corruption, it's like one thing, but there's like lots of similar things where we give to each other like different like things or do something for each other just because we know people. In Ukraine, a lot of things works not how the law says, but how you know people and you give them more a little bit more than the law allows you to give in every sphere. So, and of course, yeah, because lots of people went out of Ukraine, like less restaurants and cafes, they have less people, less guests, so less money. There is nothing like a big problem, but little by little you see that prices are going up. Some people lose jobs, some not. I feel like, we have all food, everything seems to be fine, but maybe like in winter we will not afford like some
Can't
food.
afford to buy the products, they're too expensive.
Products for ourselves. So
one of the things that I've enjoyed or been blessed by looking from outside is seeing the different ministries, like to children, to the elderly, but then also like your bicycle ministry. I mean, I'm watching the news and seeing, okay, there's rockets over here and there's problems over here. And then my next thing on my social media feed is, there's Lena and Dima riding their bikes, taking groups out past checkpoints on your bikes. They must think you're crazy, going on 2-3 day excursions. This was a passion or a dream a few years ago to have bicycles and to be able to rent them. You've done safety courses. I thought it was interesting, even in the middle of all of this chaos, that people are bringing even more. Dima fixes bikes, your husband, and he's busy fixing people's bikes and people bringing bikes from Kiev.
yes,
To have some normal rhythms inside of all of this chaos and to see how the different ways that God is using you to serve and to connect with people. The last thing before we finish, I mean, you are a born, and we would say born and bred Ukrainian. You love your nation, your country. How have you been able to process what's happening right now? It's easy to look online and just be filled with hatred toward Russians, like all Russians. But as a Ukrainian, how do you feel about your country, and as a believer, how you navigating all of this?
yeah, it's hard. Yes, of course I'm patriotic. Like I love my country, and I think God loves my country. Yeah, from the other hand, I'm Christian. I'm God's daughter, and I believe that all of His children are precious for Him, and that's why it's like really hard to take all the death of Ukrainians and even of Russians. Yes, but I think we should also tell the truth. And of course, like I feel sorry for Russian soldiers. So many of them died in Ukraine. But what can I do? They came to my land. They came themselves. There's a lot of manipulations in Ukraine, like in Christian world. Lots of Christians say, okay, we are citizens of heaven. We don't care about like war and who's right, who's wrong. But it shocks me, because how can you not care about this? Yeah, I don't think it's right. I think God wants us to care about lives and about what's going on. And I believe that if all the Christians would care and would name the things with its name, maybe Russia wouldn't come.
What do you mean by that?
Like lots of Russian Christians for this war. And they're saying that that's right. We went because God is punishing Ukraine with this war. So they feel like Russian soldiers is ones whose God's hand
Right.
came to punish.
The power of the narrative is so powerful.
But
if they're just watching one channel and they're getting all the information just one direction. Next week we'll be interviewing some friends that are still in Russia, and just how life is like another reality. And we think all these sanctions are doing all of this, and their reality is they're not really doing much. And so I encourage you to check back next week as we talk to some friends inside of Russia. But as a Ukrainian, do you have hope?
Yes, I'm optimist. Like, I want to believe that war will end soon and Ukraine will win. And we will have our territory. Of course, lots of people in Ukraine say that Ukraine gonna be like the second Israel, always ready for war. And it should be this way with such neighbors, but I really want to believe that it will end soon.
Yeah, we agree with you. Lena, thank you for sharing. I'm sad that you're leaving. I hope that we can see you in person soon again. Everybody wants this to end. There is no Nazi fascist movement inside Ukraine. We have only seen the emerging, flourishing Slavic people taking power for themselves away from a few at the top, and businesses starting to grow. You know, at Lighthouse, we had just had our first year after almost 10 of profitability. So the middle class was just starting to get on its feet, and here comes the neighbor to crush it back down to chaos and instability. And so I share your dream for a stable, flourishing Slavic people, a Ukrainian people, free to choose their own path. Thank you, Lena. And if you would like to connect with Lena and just wish her well or send a prayer, you can. I'll put her Facebook profile in our comments section or description of the podcast, and encourage you to do that. It's really important inside Ukraine that they sense and feel support and love from those outside, not just weapons and packages, but there are real human hearts on the other side in solidarity with them. So thank you, Lena.
You're welcome.
We'll see you next time on the Perspectives Podcast. Thanks for listening.